What's up, guys? We're here once again with Sonny and BJJ Fanatics. We're both a disaster today. I'm sorry, I look like a slob. I tried to get a haircut before I came here, but it didn't happen. And now, my mustache is dripping into my mouth, and my hair is my beard. It's terrible. Sonny's been having a crazy allergic reaction to something, probably hard work, because she's been complaining about doing this DVD for I don't know how long. But she's been sneezing and her eyes been watering. I don't know. We have no idea what from. Also, she has some new gear. She asked John. She had matching bottoms for this gear, and she asked John what he thought of it, and he just responded, "You look like a newspaper." It hasn't been going great. But anyways, we're going to start going over some body locking today. Now, I released my first passing instructional in 2019, and it was an all-encompassing instructional on the complete system of passing. So every different kind of passing that you can possibly think of was in that instructional. So when I got to the body lock section, I showed a lot of body locks, and I showed a lot of different details, but it wasn't all the details that I could have been showing from body lock passing. In addition, now it's 2019. We're almost in 2022 now. I'm filming this in 2021, but it's getting released in 2022, so that's why I messed up. We're in 2022 now, and from 2019 until current day, there's so much more I know about body locking now versus then. So I'm going to add more details that I had then, but also just all the new stuff I've been working on since the initial body lock, since the initial passing instructional. So we're going to start looking at initially front body locks and then move on from there. Now, how I actually got into doing body locks is a pretty interesting story. John initially showed us body lock and tight waist passing, and I never really paid too much attention to it because I was working so much on leg locks and back triangles at the time. He initially introduced body lock and tight waist passing somewhere around purple belt, when I was a purple belt, and I never really paid it too much attention. And then Jake Shields came into the academy when I was a late stage purple belt, maybe a brown belt at the time, and just had the most brutal body lock I've ever experienced ever in my life, because the only one who was good at body locking was John, but John wasn't rolling at the time. And Jake came in, and Jake was just giving everyone hell with body locks, and I was like, oh my god, this is awful. And still, he gave me problems with it, but he'd still have trouble passing my guard. If he locked his hands, he would pass me a lot of times, but sometimes I'd be able to recover. So I never really gave it too much thought. Jake would come in and he would leave, so I never really gave it too much thought still until Jake started training with us full time, because he would sporadically come from time to time. And then it just coincidentally happened that I started to work on my leg pommeling system from open guard, where I would pommel past people's legs from an open guard scenario, from an outside De La Riva, in situations where I have an inside foot, straight hamstring. I was working on all of this kind of passing where we go through here and we start playing this game. It just so happened that was the same time when Jake started training full-time with us. So while I was working on developing this leg pommeling system, Jake started training full-time with us. And then the reason why I started working on body locks was because Tom DeBlas was actually fighting Joao Assis in a grappling match. And I had never worked on body locks until then. Jake was good at them, but I never practiced them myself because I was working on other things. And Tom was like, Joao likes body locks, try to body lock me. And up until that point, it was almost impossible for me to pass Tom's guard. And he's like, lock a body lock. He's like, use body locks. Try to lock body locks. So I would just spam body locks and be like, okay, just try to lock my hands around Tom's waist. And I started locking my hands around his hips, and I was passing his guard. And I think I passed his guard more in one session than I passed his guard the entire time I knew him before that. So I had a lot of success the one day just locking my hands and trying to pass Tom's guard, or at least flattening him out and getting him into half guard or getting close to passes. And then I started thinking to myself, wow, this is a really this is a really strong passing position. And it didn't really click in my head because Jake was doing it to me and he was passing me with it and passing a lot of other guys with it and giving me trouble with it. But it never really clicked until I started using it myself, and I had so much success against guys good as Tom. And then I started thinking to myself, well, how can I combine the lock of the hands with the pommeling of the lower body? Because when you see Jake is very good at locking his hands, he locks his hands excellent, and he does a great job of forcing half guard from a body lock, and then he passes from half guard. But I said, okay, well, that's great, and that's one of the most efficient ways you can do it, but there has to be a way to keep the hips pinned in place with the lock of the hands, but also incorporate the leg pommeling system into this. And then over the last couple of years, that's what I've been working on developing. So that's what you're going to see a lot of today. You're going to see a combination of front and side body locks with a combination of splitting legs and leg riding and using a series of leg pommels to get your feet inside, get your legs inside, or collapse your partner's knees together and get the side body locks and then work from there. Just a little background on why I started doing body locks, what made them click in terms of my development, and then where I've gone from there and what I've developed since that time. All right, so we're going to go into an overview very shortly, but before we do that, let's look at what types of body locks we're going to be utilizing today, what types of body locks there are. Okay, first and most commonly, there are front body locks. Okay, where I go in and I lock my hands around my partner's hips like so. I'm in front of my partner and I have a front body lock like so. Okay, what constitutes a front body lock? A front body lock is categorized by positions where my partner has two knees around my hips. Okay, so right now she has one knee outside of my left hip and one knee outside of my right hip. This is a front body lock. Okay, so any different hand position, there's many different hand positions we can use from here. Anything where my partner has two of her knees outside of my hips is a front body lock. Okay, there are rear body locks. Okay, now rear body locks aren't applicable here. We're doing guard passing, so rear body locks, whether it be from here or whether it be from here or whether it be standing from here. Okay, these are a type of body lock, rear body locks, but they're not applicable to guard passing, so we're not going to be using them today. So we have front body locks, rear body locks. Now let's look at side body locks. Okay, like so. What are side body locks? Side body locks are categorized into situations where my partner's two knees are on one side of my body, like so. I can use head inside side body locks. I can use head outside side body locks. Okay? And there are different head positions, different hand positions, different leg positions that we can use from here. Okay? But anything where my partner's two knees are outside my hip, this is a front body lock. Or this is a side body lock. Okay? So we have front body locks. My partner's two knees are around my hips. We have rear body locks, which aren't applicable. We have side body locks, where two of my partner's knees are out to one side of my hips, one side of my body. And we have to be able to pass from both of these positions, from force half guard and change hand positions, depending on my partner's reactions and off balances. Okay, so now we've established the types of body locks. Let's look at the different varying hand positions from a front body lock and then from a side body lock. Okay. Our standard method of locking, we lock into an initial body lock when we're initially locking our hands, is with our two hands underneath our partner's arms, locked on our partner's center line like so. Now, there are three different ways that I can lock my hands in this given position. This will completely depend on the thickness of your partner's torso and the length of your arms. Okay? If you have long arms, like me, and you're dealing with someone who's relatively small, wrist to wrist will always be the best. Okay? People ask me, what's the best way to lock your hands? Think about this being a full circle, like so. my 10 fingers, a 10-finger grip is the largest circle. A palm-to-palm grip is a slightly smaller circle. A wrist-to-wrist grip is an even smaller circle. And then a figure 4 grip is the smallest circle that you can form. Now, obviously, a figure 4 is not going to be applicable from here because unless you're fighting a child, you will never be able to figure 4 your arms around someone's torso. So the 3 grips we use are wrist to wrist, which is always the tightest because of the fact that it's the smallest circle. Palm to palm, and 10 finger, which will always be the loosest because of the fact that it's the smallest circle. Okay? It's the bigger circle, sorry. If you're fighting someone who's very small and you have long arms, always go wrist to wrist. If you're fighting someone who's very large and you have short arms, always go either palm to palm or 10 finger. Okay? So I always generally prefer going in wrist to wrist like so and going in for my body locks. But you can use palm to palm, you can use 10 finger grips like so. Also, the smaller the circle you close, whether you go palm to palm or wrist to wrist, the more pressure on your wrist it will put. So if you have bad wrists, I generally recommend going in and using 10 finger grips like so. It's a little bit easier on your wrists. For me, my wrists are fine, so I always generally prefer wrist to wrist grips like so. Okay? So that's with hands centered in your standard body lock, we can use one of those 3 grips. Another grip we can use is a long arm, short arm method, where instead of having my hands centered on my partner's center line, we go long arm, short arm like so. This is usually with the intention of getting an elbow inside my partner's hip like so. So I can dominate the inside real estate at the hip. So I can go long arm, short arm here, and now from here I can switch, have my hands locked in a slightly different position with a different function, and I have one long, one short, and I usually look to use this to get an elbow inside my partner's hip. Not always, but usually, if I have locked hands. I have a position where we can go in and we can lock with hands in the center, but this time we can go over one of our partner's arms. So we have over-under. And again, you can lock in one of those 3 positions depending upon the length of your arms versus the size and girth of your partner's torso. You can go double over, where now I lock both of my partner's hands in place and I lock the elbows to the body, and we go and we lock with double overhooks, like so. So when we're talking about locked hands with a front body lock, those are your main positions. We have hands centered on my partner's center line in one of 3 locks. We have a long arm, short arm, like so, and like so. We have an over-under with my hands centered. It doesn't make sense now to go long arm, short arm. We keep hands centered like so. And we have double overs, and now we keep our hands centered like so. When we're talking about body locks, it's important that we also go over the position of unlocked hands. Because yes, you're correct, they're not body locks. My hands aren't locked around my partner's body. The positions are so similar, they go hand in hand. It's important to go over unlocked hands as well as having locked hands. So what are our positions where we can work where we have unlocked hands this time? Okay. When we have unlocked hands, we go in and we can use a tight waist grip. We reach through and we simply grab a tight waist on our partner like so. This is usually used so that we have a free hand to post on our partner's knee, or more commonly, inside of our partner's hip. And we can use this to convert to a long arm, short arm, where we actually have locked hands with an inside elbow. So from here, we can go locked hands like so. We can go unlocked hands like so. We can utilize the tight waist, and we can go back and forth between the two. And we'll look more at that later. Okay? We can go with double underhooks, where instead of locking my hands like so, I can just use double underhooks. I can go up high and I can lock up by my partner's shoulder line. Or I can go in, I can plant my hands here. So instead of actually locking my partner's hips in place with the true classical body lock, I can unlock my hands and I can start moving to true underhooks from here. Or now instead of going to body locks, we have double underhooks. instead of being down by my partner's hips, we're up by my partner's shoulders. And then of course, using underhook, overhook positions, where I have one underhook, one overhook, and we can start to work from these positions. So while they're not your classical body locks, where I have my hands locked around my partner's body, they are important because you have to be able to transition between locked and unlocked hands depending upon what your partner does. Okay, so from front body locks, those are our main positions we work from, going from locked hands to unlocked hands and changing our hand position based on what our partner is looking for. All right, so now let's look at different hand positions when we get to a side body lock. All right, now these are differentiated into two different positions, head inside and head outside. When we have a head inside body lock, head inside side body lock, we can use a couple different hand positions from here. One is we can use a near side lock, where my hands are locked on my partner's near hip like so. So now my partner goes to scoot out and away from me. It's a difficult thing. It's difficult for her to move around. In general, I use, actually we'll go over that later. I use a near side lock. We have a far side lock. From here, we lock our hands over our partner's far side hip, and we can transition to inside elbow positions if we want. We can do a lot of different things from here. We have a near side tight waist, where my hand, my near hand, reaches through, and we use a tight waist like so, and we have unlocked hands. So now we can use this to move my partner's legs. We can start bringing our partner's two knees together, and we can start working from here. And we have a far side tight waist, where I use a tight waist on my partner's far hip, and we just go in and we lock like so, and now from here we can start working. In general, I keep my hands locked. If I'm going to move my hand position away, or going to switch my hand position, I do so briefly, and then I relock my hands. I do so briefly, and then I change my body position. Okay? Because of the fact that normally when I go side body lock, my partner stays seated from here. She can start scooting away from me, just like hip out that way, like shrimp away. She can start scooting away and inverting the knee and start facing me. Okay? So I'm not going to say to never unlock your hands, but in general, I usually stay for the majority of the time with my hands locked in some configuration. All right? Now, depending on what your partner is going to do from here, if my partner is looking to try to turn away from me, I usually use either a near side lock or a far side tight waist. Okay, my hands are locked in the near hip, or I have a far side tight waist like so. And now when she goes to turn away from me, it turns into a tight waist where I can start moving into situations where I can control my partner's hips and start taking my partner's back. If I see my partner's trying to turn into me, I usually use some kind of far side lock, like so, or a near side tight waist. So now my partner goes to turn towards me, we can start getting my partner's knees to point away from me, start going into leg rides and things of that nature. Okay, so we have a couple different ways to lock. We have head inside with a side body lock. We can lock our hands on the near side, the near hip, like so. We can lock our hands on the far hip, like so. Like so. We can use a near side tight waist, okay? Like so. We can use a far side tight waist, like so. If my partner tries to turn towards me here, this wouldn't make sense to stay with the far side tight waist. If my partner went to go turn away from me, this would make sense. If my partner tried to turn towards me here, it would make sense for a near side tight waist. If she went to go turn away from me, it wouldn't really make much sense here. I'll go over this in detail later. But just so you understand, side body lock, head inside, we have these different hand positions. Now these change a little bit when we go to head outside, side body lock. When we go head outside, side body lock, like so, what I generally recommend is using a near side lock, like so. So my hand's locked my partner's knee or hip. So when she goes to shrimp away, it's a difficult thing. What I don't want is for my partner to start overwrapping my head, threatening guillotines, and then she shrimps away, and she inverts the knee. If I lock over my partner's far hip, it's hard to keep my partner's knee from inverting. Go ahead. Your knee can usually always invert. So I play either with a near side lock like so. So my partner goes to shrimp away from me. I have locked hands and a closed wedge around my partner's hips. Or if I'm looking to return my partner's back to the floor, elbow to the floor, I go to a near side tight waist like so, and then I start using claw grips. Where now I can reach over my partner's shoulder, and as she goes to shrimp away, I can put her back on the floor, I can put her elbows down to the floor, and I can start working from here. So, a little bit different change in hand positions here. I typically use near side locks, so my partner goes to shrimp away, it's difficult. If I go to a far side lock from here, and she goes to invert that knee, it's usually a pretty easy thing to do. Or, I use a near side tight waist where I reach across and grab my partner's far hip, and now from here, we can go over when she goes to shrimp away now. It's usually a pretty difficult thing, and I can put my partner's back on the floor using that claw grip. So our different hand positions when we have head inside versus head outside, side body lock. All right, let's look at a very basic, very general outline and overview of what we're going to be going over in this instructional. All right, everything is going to first start from how to enter into front body locks, right? Because we're not going to learn how to pass until we learn how to actually enter into a body lock and lock our hands on a talented opponent. So the first thing we're going to look to do is find ways to enter into front body locks through various hand fighting methods and go into front body locks when we're kneeling versus seated. Then we're going to look at ways to go into entrances into front body locks when we are standing versus seated. And then once we actually get to locked hands, now we're going to look at either passing or forcing half guard or forcing side body locks from this initial front body lock here. So every different hand configuration, every different leg configuration, whether it be locked hands, unlocked hands, whether it be over, under, whether it be double unders, doesn't make a difference. We're going to look at how to pass from a front body lock. We're going to look at how to force half guard from a front body lock, and how to force a side body lock, how to convert to a side body lock from a front body lock. So everything we're going to do first will be based around entering into a front body lock and working from a front body lock. Okay. Once we finish side or front body locks, we'll then move on to side body locks. So how to enter side body locks from a kneeling position, like so. How to enter side body locks from a standing position, like so. And how to solidify passes from various side body locks, depending upon what I do, what my partner does, how we can either pass or go in and start taking my partner's back. And then we'll go into locking body locks from half guard after that. So we're not going to pass half guard because it's a different, we're going to work on that in a separate instructional. We're going to work on how we can, if our partner sits up and punches an underhook in, for example, how we can go in and start using body locks from half guard to return my partner back down to the floor, and then we can go into passes in the half guard series. But we'll be locking body locks from half guard. So we're going to first start off in entering into front body locks from kneeling and standing, passing with a front body lock, forcing half guard with a front body lock, or converting it to a side body lock. And then we'll look at how to enter into a side body lock from kneeling and from standing, passing and solidifying passes from there. Then we're going to look at how to set up going into body locks from half guard, keeping my partners back on the floor, and then we'll finish it with that. And then we'll go into a different instructional, which is half guard passing, where we'll study how to actually pass half guard in detail once we use body locks to get to half guard. What I'm about to go over is super, super important. I cannot stress this enough. When a lot of people teach or learn body locks, they are taught either body locks or tight waist passing. They're taught you either lock your hands and you keep them locked, or you use unlocked hands and you keep them unlocked. And they teach them as two separate things, where you either use body locks or you use tight waists. You have to be able to go from locked to unlocked hands, or unlocked to locked hands, and you should be able to move back and forth fluidly between the two. What you can't have is a situation where you just lock your hands and you just squeeze as hard as you can and you never unlock your hands after you get them locked. You'll have success to a certain level and they'll start getting shut down past there. So you have to have the confidence that even if you lock your hands, if you feel like you're getting stuck, you have to have the confidence to unlock your hands, even if it's briefly, to unlock your hands, advanced position, and then if you want to, relock your hands. Or you have to have the confidence to start with unlocked hands, and then once you get the position you want, you go back in and you relock your hands. There's no reason why, because I start with locked hands, why I have to stay with locked hands. I can move my hands to either to different positions. From here I can go in and I can start unlocking my hands, and I can work from here. Once I unlock my hands, I can go back in and I can relock my hands, and I can go back to work. Now I can start playing a game where I start working from here. Now I can unlock my hands again and I can start to play from there. So you have to be able to lock and unlock as you see necessary. There's no reason why I just lock my hands right from the get-go, and now I just hold on as hard as I can. I never unlock my hands, and we get into a situation where we stalemate, where I can't pass her, but she can't move around, and we just end up playing in this position for minutes at a time. If I feel like I'm getting stuck for any reason, there's no reason why we can't go in. We can't unlock the hands briefly. We can't unlock the hands briefly. And then, when you get to a better position, now we can go back and we can relock the hands. And we can work from here again. Okay? So you don't draw this imaginary line between body locking and tight waist passing. You can use both interchangeably, and you have to against the best guys. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself in the moves that you have. So make sure that you don't get into the habit of just going in and locking your hands and holding your partner for dear life, saying, okay, I locked my hands, I can't unlock them now. No. Play between body locks, tight waists, locked and unlocked hands, and you can change back and forth through both of these and get to better positions, and you can go back and forth between one another. All right, so now let's look at another imaginary line that people kind of draw when they're teaching passing, where most people either are body lock passers or most people are half guard passers. Now this is a very foolish way to think. If you're a good half guard passer, you must be a good body lock passer to reach your full potential. If you're a good body lock passer, you must be a good half guard passer. Let's look at why this is. When we engage into someone's half guard, what are the main issues associated with passing from this position? It's how can I get past my partner's top leg, and how can I get past my partner's top arm, usually with the cross shoulder post. Okay, the higher and higher level you get, the more issue you have with the with the top arm and the upper body. But right from the beginning, you deal with anyone who's blue belt level or above, even white belt level, and they know to put a knee shield half guard in. So you find yourself in a position where you spend minutes at a time trying to fight past his top leg, and so losing battle most of the time because it's your hands versus your partner's legs. So I try to push my partner's leg around. It's a difficult thing to do. So I spend minutes at a time trying to get past my partner's top leg, and maybe I flat my partner out, maybe I don't, and it's kind of a toss-up from here. The one beauty, or one of the beauties, about body lock passing is that when I lock into a body lock, I play a series of dilemma where I can either pass my partner's guard right away, or I can use a body lock to force half guard. Like so. Or now, I'm in half guard with a body lock, and I've effectively gotten past my partner's top leg and my partner's top frame arm. So I can use a body lock to force myself into a chest-to-chest half guard, which is a completely different position than being in a knee shield half guard. So one of the great utilities of using body lock passing is to force your partner into a half guard where you're not dealing with that knee shield, where you can immediately bypass the knee shield and you go from a body lock to a chest-to-chest half guard right away, and you can work your passes much easier. Instead of engaging someone in a seated guard, I knock them over into bottom position, I knock them down to their back, I go into half guard, and now you go in and you're dealing with this knee shield where you have to fight from here. Instead, I can go in right away, I can play a hand fighting game, I can lock into a body lock, and now I can sprawl past my partner's leg, I can go and I can step over the knee, and now I force half guard, and now instead of spending 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes trying to get chest to chest in half guard, you've done it in 30 seconds or 45 seconds, a minute. And you cut down the time it takes you to get chest to chest in half guard and get past that annoying top leg. All right? So if you're good at body lock passing, you have to be good at half guard passing, because most avenues against high level people, when you're playing from body locks, will lead you into half guard chest to chest. And you must be a good pinner and passer and finisher from a top half guard position. And on the flip side of this coin, if my partner is in half guard and she's reaching towards me and she goes to punch an underhooks, for example, there's many different ways that we can do this. She goes to punch an underhooks, for example, I must be good now at going in and starting to flatten my partner out with body locks. Where now from here, when she goes to start working, I can put her flat on the floor, I can start working from here, and now we can start passing or pommeling legs inside, going back into my partner's legs, and using standard under over or double under or whatever different body lock variations we want from here, or I can start passing my partner. So you have to be able to change between body locks and half guard at the drop of a dime. You can go from half guard into body locks, and you go from body locks into half guard. You can't be, if you want to reach your full potential as a guard passer, you can't just be a body lock passer, and you can't just be a half guard passer, okay? Most of what we do in body locks, front body locks specifically, is going to be forcing half guard, right? It's going to be very unlikely against the world's best guys that you lock a body lock and you just shoot right past their legs and pass them into side control or mounts. It can happen, and it happens a lot because most high-level people are terrible. But against the absolute best guys in the world, what's most of the time is going to happen is you're going to go from body lock to half guard. And then the responsibility is on you to say, okay, I flattened the guy in half guard, now I have to actually pass a half guard. So you have to be good at pinning, keeping people pinned, and passing and finishing from half guard. Right, so sticking with this theme from the previous clips, a lot of people, when they're teaching body locking, they make a distinction between front body locks and side body locks. That's just not the case. You have to be able to use these interchangeably. Like some people will shoot to a side body lock. They get to a position where they're out past their partner's legs, and then their partner inverts a knee. They bring a knee back inside, and now they say, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with this. I feel like I'm in danger." And they disengage the hands, and they go back and they try to shoot past the legs again. There's no reason to unlock your hands. Even if your partner gets to a front body lock, front body lock, and brings the knees back inside, there's no reason to unlock your hands from here. You just keep working from a front body lock until you force half guard or you convert it back to a side body lock. And conversely, if I flatten my partner out, like so, and then she goes to forward shift me, there's no reason why I can't convert it back to a side body lock, and then I start working from here once again. So you have to be able to interchangeably use front and side body locks together with one another. You can't just do one or the other. I can't just be a player who will only engage if I can get outside the legs. There's going to be times where, number one, you can't get outside the legs, and two, where you do get outside the legs and you actually lock your hands, but your partner gets the knee back inside, and now you go right into a front body lock, and instead of disengaging and moving back the way and trying to get back outside your partner's legs again, you just work right from here. Or you have your hands locked, your partner goes to forward shift you and move you around. We move to a side body lock, now we work from here. We start playing. Now let's say I go to step over my partner's knees, for example. I make a mistake. She goes to bring the knees to the chest. She goes back, and she forces me to a front body lock. That's fine. I just work from here, and I start playing a game where I continue to go into different passing sequences right from there. So you have to be able to play front and side body locks together, just as you play the previous moves together. You have to be able to chain all these together as these things are happening quickly. So let's look at the two main issues we associate with initially locking a body lock. Okay? Because when I go to extend myself towards my partner's hips, there is some degree of overextension. So the question is, what issues am I going to face when I initially go in to lock my partner's hips, and what responses will this elicit from my partner? There are two main reasons why someone will get gun shy when they're trying to go in and lock body locks. The first is when I go in and I start overextending my partner just immediately, instead of just sitting here or falling straight down to her back, my partner immediately falling to a hip and going threatening sumigeshis and off balancing me from one side to the other. And because I'm overextended, and a lot of times my hands are locked or almost locked, when she falls to a side, my hand gets trapped underneath my partner's body, or my partner has some kind of grip on my arm, so when I go to base out, my arm gets stuck, and now you go to lock a body lock, and next thing you know, you're getting launched with sumigeshi, and your bottom half guard, your bottom side control, your bottom mount, and it's just your legs are getting entered into, and you're like, okay, well, that sucks. I'm trying to body lock past my partner, but I'm just getting thrown across the room with sumigeshi. The second issue associated with this is that the second I go to actually lock my hands around my partner's hips, my partner just shoves my head to his side, and now she just goes over and she locks guillotine grips on me, whether it's arm in, high elbow, low elbow, whatever the case is. And now, because my hands are locked around my partner's hips, I have no defensive hands. And if I unlock my hands from my partner's hips, now I have defensive hands, but when I finally clear the guillotine, now my partner brings their hands back inside and there's no body locks, and it's hard for me to go in and actually lock my hands and control my partner. In addition, even if I do clear the guillotine, like so, now I'm still overextended, and there's no body lock, and my weight's coming backwards, and now my partner can start to capitalize by taking overhooks or punching in underhooks or applying from here. Because I'm overextended, she can start to attack me as soon as I clear my head. So when I go in, I actually do lock my hands, my partner shoves my head to a guillotine, and I'm either one, worst case scenario, I'm getting submitted or getting swept from this guillotine, or two, even as I go to clear my head, I go to look to start posting my partner's hips and clearing the head, and from here my partner starts to dig in underhooks or punch in overhooks and hit sumigeshis or do whatever she's going to do to start countering me from there. So you start to go in, you try to punch into body locks. My partner either one, threatens with sumigeshi and severely off balance with me right from the beginning, or two, starts bringing my head from one side or the other and punching into guillotine grips, where now I start running into issues of, okay, if I keep my hands locked from here and progress forward, I'm going to get submitted and come right onto a submission. And if I do clear my head and I have to unlock my hands and really address this guillotine, my partner can start punching in underhooks or overhooks and going into counter offense. So if you start initially practicing body locks, you start running into these initial problems, and you say, well, this isn't worth it. You start getting gun shy. You say, this isn't worth it. If I go to extend myself towards my partner and I overextend my hands and I have no defensive hands, she's going to sweep me or submit me, and then you stop going for body locks altogether. So our question is, how can we get around this initial fear of overextending myself towards my partner when we're entering into front body locks and deal with these two issues, sumigeshis and guillotines? All right, so now let's look at a little general rule that we follow to avoid being put into guillotines and avoid sumigeshis. Whenever my partner tries to hit a sumigeshi off of my initial body lock attempt or shove my head to a guillotine, one thing has to happen. My head has to drift far off of my partner's center line. If my head stays aligned with my partner's center line, there are no guillotines and there are no sumigeshis. The center line, for those of you who don't know, is the line that draws my partner's body in half. So if my head stays on that line and my partner goes to off... Why are you laughing at this? I don't know what's happening. If my partner goes to off-balance me with a sumigeshi, and my head drifts far off the center line, she'll be able to either sweep me or off-balance me. If my partner goes to shove my head to a guillotine, and from here, she can achieve getting my head far out and over the center line, she can start threatening me from there. But if my head stays relatively close to my partner's center line, and she goes to off-balance me with the sumigeshi, she can't do it. If she goes to off-balance me in the opposite direction, she can't move my head, she can't hit sumigeshi, she can't off-balance me. If she goes to punch me to a guillotine, I recenter the head, she can't threaten me with the guillotine. So for me, what I'm looking to do is to keep my head as close to center as possible. Now, the most basic ways that we can do this is on two knees, and having my partner go to off-balance me to one side with the sumigeshi, and we just take our head across to the far shoulder. Okay? Now, you have to understand that there's some play here. I don't keep it right on the center line. If she goes to shove my head to one side, she'll be able to do it. So I have to compensate for her off balance by taking my head to the opposite side she's trying to go to. So if she tries to push my head to her right shoulder, I take my head slightly off center towards her left shoulder. Now the issue is, if I go so far over to the left shoulder, then she can off balance me in the opposite direction. So if she goes to sumigeshi with a kawai right, and I take my head all the way to the left shoulder, it completely negates her ability to sumigeshi right. But now because I'm so far left, if she quickly switches collar ties, now she can push me to the other side. And now I'm severely off balance on one side. So while I gain a strong base of support on one side, I lose base of support on the other side. So my goal is to play a game where I keep my head as close to center as possible. My head will drift slightly from one shoulder to the other, but it will never go so far where my partner at any given moment can switch and off-balance me to that side. So my partner goes to sumigeshi right, my head moves to her left. When she goes to sumigeshi to her left, my head moves to her right. But I never go so far over where if she makes a quick switch, now she can bring my forehead down to the floor and get my head off center and go into severe off balances. Okay, so we play a game where we recenter the head based on where my partner wants to take me. The same is true for guillotines. The second I see my partner go to shove my head to a side, I just take my head back to center. She goes to shove it to the other side, I take my head back to center. She goes to take my head to the other side, and from here I take my head back to center. If I feel like my partner's rib cage is in the way and I can't recenter my head, we can always circle the head down first and bring it back to center. If I feel like my ear is going too far past my partner's rib cage, I can't take my head back in the typical means, I can always circle my head down first by going chin to chest, bringing it back to center. She goes to shove it to the other side, and go back to center. She goes to go same side, and go back to center. She goes to the other side, and go back to center. You go back to center. So we always look to recenter our head and keep our head relatively on our partner's center line. Now there's more advanced ways of doing this. Let's say our partner goes to shove our head out to our right side and goes to hit sumigeshi. And from here, I feel like, oh man, I can't just use my head to recenter my head back on the center line. It's too far gone. I can step a leg up. And now I have a drive leg, where now when she goes to take my head off center, I can use the drive leg to push my head back to center line. She goes in the opposite direction, I feel like, oh man, if I stay here, I can't recenter my head. So I use a drive leg, I take my head back to center. Now my partner goes to switch collar ties, and she goes to go in the opposite direction. Now, if I have to switch legs. So she goes to drive in one side, I step one leg up, she goes to switch, and I have to step the opposite leg up. So we play a game where we can use drive legs on either side to recenter our head. And you have to be able to switch at the drop of a dime, where she goes one side, I step a leg up. She goes to switch, I go knee to knee, foot comes out. She goes to switch, knee to knee, foot comes out. She goes to switch, knee to knee, foot comes out, and then I recenter my head. Same thing with guillotines. She goes to shove it to one side, and from here, I can use a leg up. I can bring my head back to center. Let's say she goes to shove my head to one side, she keeps the collar tie, like so, and she's looking to shove it to a guillotine from here. She's looking to sit up and shove to a guillotine. And she goes to use that collar tie, just stay with the collar tie. She goes to use that collar tie, it's hard for me to recenter my head. Attention. Hard for me to recenter my head. I can step a leg up. I can use a drive leg to recenter my head. She switches sides. Use that drive leg to recenter my head. So we play this game where at any given moment we can shoot our head right back to the center line. If my partner goes to off balance me in one direction, we have to be able to shoot our head slightly to the opposite side of the center line of the side she's trying to take us to. So if she's trying to take us to her right, we have to take our head slightly left to the center line. And then if she's trying to take us left, we have to take our head slightly right of the center line. But at no point can we drift so far to one side where a quick switch will allow her to either sumigaeshi to that side or shove my head to a guillotine position and start threatening strangles. Another great way to avoid getting swept or your head stuffed to guillotines is to put their backs on the floor as soon as you lock your hands. Okay, so understand that if your partner wants to stuff your head to a guillotine, their head has to be higher than yours. All right, if their head's not higher than yours, there's no guillotine. So if my partner's back is on the floor, if she wants to stuff my head to a guillotine, she has to sit up and then move to a guillotine grip, and now she can start to go into guillotines. If my partner wants to sumigaeshi me, she has to forward shift first and start going into situations where she can off balance me, get my head off center, and then put me into compromising kazushis and then go into her follow-up attacks. If I can put my partner's back on the floor, you take away all of your partner's ability to lock guillotine grips and to go into sumigaeshis right away. Yes, she can forward shift you and she can go into chained attacks, but she can't just immediately sumigaeshi from her back. So the second I lock my hands on my partner, I stop the initial sumigaeshi or initial guillotine by keeping my head centered. And now from here, we're just going to take two hands around our partner's hips, and we're going to pull our partner's hips to her heels. The big mistake everyone makes is they lock their hands and they drive forward towards their partner. When I drive forward towards her, it's a pretty easy thing for her not to fall straight back, but fall to a hip. And now that gets my head off center and I'm off balance. So the first thing I want to look at is pulling my partner's hips to her heels. Like so. So now, when she goes to off balance me from here, it's much, much harder. I put her shoulders behind her hips. And now when I drive forward, when she goes to off balance me, it's almost impossible. Okay? So my goal, when I lock up on my partner, scoot back a little. My goal when I lock up on my partner is to connect her butt to her heels the best I can, and to put my partner's shoulders behind her hips. If I can do those two things, it's going to be incredibly hard for your partner to off balance you, provided she stays in that position. Sure, she can forward shift and go into other counters, but if we can put the shoulders behind the hips and the heels close to the butt, it's going to be very difficult for your partner to go into any offense from there. So the second we lock up from this position, we're immediately going to keep our head centered right from the beginning. She goes to off balance me, I'm recentering my head the whole time. And now I pull my partner's butt towards me. Now, if your arms are extended, you may have to start with a 10-finger grip. But there's no reason that after I pull my partner towards me, I can't switch to a tighter wrist-to-wrist grip, then drive my partner forward and flatten her out like so. Okay? A question you might ask yourself is, okay, what happens if I'm a smaller person I'm trying to pull a larger person towards me. And I feel like I'm pulling, but I just can't pull my partner's hips in. Whenever I see this, we use a momentum method where we create movement and momentum to drag my partner's hips towards me. So whenever I see this, I take my one knee towards my partner's center line, and I take a second knee back like so. It's important that before I do this, I take my one knee in towards my partner's center line. What I don't want is to keep my knees wide apart. I sprawl one leg back, and now your partner just flicks their legs to close guard, and now your body lock is useless. So when I go to do this, I have to make sure that I first take one of my knees to my partner's center line. So that now, when I sprawl one leg back, and she goes to lock a close guard, she can't. Only one of her legs can get up and over mine, and the other leg is trapped. And now from here, I use momentum of my leg kicking back, and then as I move everything backwards, I pull my partner in towards me. So we can use a method. It's like you just can't move your partner. Where we play from here, I'm trying to pull my partner in, I feel like it's just not working from here. Knee comes to center, I step a leg back, and from here I just rock. I lean forwards and backwards. Forwards. I sag everything backwards. Knee goes to the floor. My right knee follows. And I pull my partner towards me. Okay, so a couple ways to put our partners back on the floor. We lock up immediately, and from here, whatever grip we can get to, we use. Sometimes it'll be a 10 finger, sometimes it'll be a palm to palm, sometimes it'll be a wrist to wrist. Sometimes we start with a 10 finger or palm to palm, and then once we get our partner's hips close, we can switch it to a wrist to wrist. Okay? Or we can stay with a 10 finger. It's up to you. The choice is yours. Let's scoot back. We start with the shoulders in front of the hips. We start with the heels and the butt at great distance. And from here we lock up, we pull our partner towards us, and as we pull our partner towards us, you see the shoulders start to drift behind the hips, and the space between the heels and the hips close. Now when she goes to off balance me, it's a difficult thing. And now all I have to do is put my partner's shoulder blades on the floor, and that's a pretty easy thing to start working from this position. Okay? Now there's no immediate Tsumigaeshi danger, and there's no immediate guillotine danger. Conversely, I feel like I'm dealing with someone much bigger than me. I feel like I'm trying to pull my partner in, it's just not happening. Knee goes to center line to avoid two legs coming out and the closed guard being locked. And now from here I just lean forward, I shoot a leg back, and I pull my partner in using a movement-based method where I use momentum to take my partner in towards me, connecting the heels and the butt and putting the shoulders behind the hips. If I can put my partners back on the floor, that's a great secondary way to stop your partner from going into an immediate Tsumigaeshi or guillotining you. So the second I lock my hands, I immediately center my head, I keep my head on the center line, and then I flatten my partner out and put her shoulder blades on the floor. Let's talk about some general cues for when to go in and lock our hands in front body lock. Let's look when to lock versus not when to lock, or when to not lock. When my partner's in front of me, if at any point I see my partner has some kind of wedge between myself and her that inhibits my ability to lock a meaningful grip around my partner's waist, this is not the time to go for body locks. So what does that mean? Whenever my partner has some kind of lower body or upper body position that doesn't allow me to come forwards onto her. So for example, if her knees are inside my shoulders, if the width of her knees is inside the width of my shoulders, this is not the time to go for body locks. Because now, when I come forwards, she has her shins and her knees inside my shoulders, and even if I lock my hands, which I usually can't, even if I lock my hands, it's not a meaningful grip. She just extends her legs away, now my hands separate, and now I'm overextended where she can start to go into attacks. So anytime I see my partner's knees are very close together, this is not the time to go for body locks. Anytime I see my partner has some kind of wedge between myself and her at the upper body, whether it be just a very general straight shoulder post, whether it be some kind of cross shoulder post, whether it be some kind of collar tie with an inside elbow, where now when I go to come forwards, she can manage distance between myself and her, this is not the best time to go for body locks. Okay? So anytime I see my partner has knees or elbows inside my shoulders, where there's a physical wedge between myself and my partner, this is not the time to try to extend myself to get to a body lock, not be able to get a meaningful grip, and then get overextended in the process. Okay? Now, cues for when I'm looking to go into front body locks will be the opposite. Anytime I see that there's an open pathway to being able to lock my hands in a meaningful way to my partner's hips is when I should be shooting to body locks. So when is that time? Anytime my partner's knees are outside my shoulders, where I can get shoulders and elbows inside my partner's knees, where now I can go through and lock a meaningful grip on my partner. So anytime I can come through and I see my partner has relatively wide knees, we can go in and we can shoot to a front body lock. Anytime I see my partner has hands that are not actively posting on me in some way, where from here I see either a separation of elbows from my partner's rib cage, either with both arms or with one arm, or I see two of my partner's elbows close to my partner's rib cage like so. Okay? Because now if I see the separation and her elbows are outside my shoulders, we can come in and we can easily lock our hands with a classical body lock. Anytime I see one of my partner's elbows are glued to a rib cage like so, and now from here I can get one hand in and the other hand over, I can lock into a body lock where I trap my partner's arm, and now we work from an over-under body lock. Or anytime I see my partner's elbows connected to the rib cage like so, where now we can get our head lower than our partner's shoulders. We can come forward and we can go into a body lock like so, where we go double overs instead. The big mistake people make is whether they try to go with double overs or with an over-under, is as they come forward with the chin over their partner's shoulder. So they come on to two underhooks, and now that extension becomes a liability. Rather than having the head lower than the shoulders, you need the collarbone, and now they come forward onto a body lock instead. So I make sure that I'm looking to go over one or two of my partner's arms, that from here I come forwards with my head in good position. I never come forward with a high head where it actually punches the underhook up, and now I start to get jeopardized with overextension and submissions, sweeps, etc., etc. So we're looking for elbow position. Are my partner's elbows separated from the rib cage? If so, and the knees are wide, it's a pretty easy thing to go in and lock my hands. Are my partner's arms close to the rib cage and not posting on me? Okay? Right now, yes, my partner's elbows are inside my shoulders, but there's no physical wedge between myself and my partner. If she has one elbow in like so, and she's a second elbow in like so, and there's a physical wedge between myself and her, now I can't close the distance. So anytime I can close distance, even if my partner's elbows are inside my shoulders, if there's no physical wedge between the two of us, there's no reason why I can't bring my head into good position, come forwards, and lock up. Whether it's with one or with two arms trapped. And we can start working like so. So in short, we're looking at lower body and upper body cues. With lower body cues, we're looking at knee position. Or my partner's knees inside the width of my shoulders. If so, I can't come forwards onto my partner. If her knees are outside the width of my shoulders, I can come forward and I can lock my hands in a meaningful way. The upper body. Does the upper body have some kind of grip on me that prohibits me coming forward and getting control over my partner? Most of the time, those grips will involve elbows inside your shoulders. Okay? If there's no upper body grips that inhibit your ability to come forward towards your partner, then we look at elbow position. Are the elbows wide allowing me to go underneath both arms? Or is one or both of the elbows tucked so closely towards the rib cage where now I can have proper head position, I can come forward, I can lock over my partner's arms, and I can play a game where I can body lock both arms inside the body lock and start working from there. Okay, so just some very general cues. Obviously, there are more specific exceptions and things like that to these rules. These are just very general rules that you look at when you're looking to go into front body locks. You look at knee position, you look at elbow position relative to yourself and relative to your partner's body. Let's look at our general cues now for when we try to force a side body lock. This is the opposite in terms of lower body position as front body locking. When we're looking at side body locks, we actually want our partner's knees to be close together. The closer our partner's knees are together, the easier it is to move them side to side. Okay, so for example, if we're in a front body lock and our partner goes to forward shift us and the legs extend, now the knees come together, and it's a pretty easy thing to transition to a side body lock like so. If my partner has wide knees like so, from here I can come in and I can play a game where I take my partner's knees out to one side and I bring the knees briefly together, and I come forward and I go in and I lock side body locks. So anytime I see my partner's knees are relatively close together, this will make it hard for me to go forward into front body locks. But it will make it much easier for me to transition to side body locks. If my partner starts to realize you're good at side body locking and you go to throw the legs to the side, your partner will instinctually open the knees to avoid the side body lock, and that's when you come forward and you go into front body locks instead. Okay, so you see the dilemma starting to occur here, where if your partner has knees splayed open, it's a pretty easy thing to come forward and go straight linearly into front body locks. And if you feel like your partner is avoiding front body locks by having the knees close together, it's a pretty easy thing to create an angle and go into side body locks. Okay, so this is why you have to be able to play both together. So this is a dilemma we're creating at the lower body. Now, at the upper body, if my partner has knees close together and she has some kind of frames on me, okay, which inhibit me from coming straight into her, whether it's cross frame like this or whether it's a collar tie and she's an inside elbow. The thing with these frames on the upper body, because you're creating an angle with your partner, it's much easier to slide past the frames than it would be if I'm trying to just go straight into the frames. We're not going straight into the frames, we're sliding past the frames. So the upper body grips are much less important. I can always find a way where I can take the legs to the side, and now when I go to come forward, when she goes to stop me coming forward with this grip, it's a pretty easy thing to lock my hands, and now when she goes to separate my hands or push me away, it's a pretty easy thing to get her hands off me. Even if she goes with a near side collar tie, from here, I push the hands to the side, I come forwards, and now, when she goes to move out and away, it's a pretty easy thing to start off balancing her and get those hands to the floor, okay? So I'm looking to shoot by my partner's legs. Your cues will be mostly at the lower body. I'm looking for knee position. Now, there are some specific differences and exceptions where your partner has certain grips where we'll make it harder at the upper body to shoot by your partner's legs and lock a side body lock, but most of your cues come from your partner's knee position. The closer the knees are together, the easier it will be to shoot outside the knees and get to a side body lock. So she can use any assortment of upper body grips. So maybe she can use an inside collar tie. It's a pretty easy thing from here to go in and lock a side body lock. She can use a cross shoulder post. It's a pretty easy thing from here to go in and lock a side body lock. She can use two frames of my shoulders like so. It's a pretty easy thing from here to create an angle, and now I come in and I go side body lock. So you see you're kind of brushing past the frames instead of going straight into the frames. It's the same concept as if we're trying to pass someone's guard. And she posts on my shoulders and starts pushing me away, just two shoulders. She goes to start pushing me away from here. She has strong frames. But instead of going into the frames, if I start brushing past the frames, now it's harder for her to post and they become less effective. It's the same thing here. When we start creating an angle, my partner has frames inside. We start to create an angle on our partner where we get outside the knees. Now when she goes to extend, 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 it's a pretty easy thing to brush the frames on by and go through and lock my hands in a side body lock and start to do real work from here. Okay? So your cues when you're looking for side body locks, well, your partner's knee position. The closer the knees are, specifically if their knees are inside the width of your shoulders, that's the time to go for side body locks. Front body locks will be impossible, side body locks will be easy. And in general, if your partner has frames on your upper body, it will be a pretty easy thing to brush past those frames because of the angles you're creating and get to a side body lock regardless of most upper body grips.